The first one, 90 degrees. So first of all, where is 90 degrees? 90 degrees is here at the end of the first quadrant right here. It's as if you were starting on the x-axis and working your way around to the 90 degrees. Well, we know that cosine, now, we're talking about this angle. We're going to use a specific angle, so instead of theta, we're using 90 degrees so that we know which picture we're looking at. Normally, it is adjacent over hypotenuse, and if you think of your general right triangle, adjacent is, remember, your x side. So we'd have x over your hypotenuse is normally your r side now. So how do we figure out what these values are here? Well, when we have quadrantal angles like this, we're going to always just go ahead and lay on the quadrant at the value 1. Wherever we're at. In this case, that would put us at the point 0, 1, because you're not going left or right. So what this would mean is that we'd take our x value for our point, which here is 0, and that would go on top, divided by, we don't know our r yet. So we would have to find that. How do you find r? Remember, we've got our good old-fashioned version of the Pythagorean Theorem, which is x squared plus y squared equals, in this case, r squared, because we're using x, y's, and r's in our right triangles if you look at the top of the page. So our x here, in this one, in this picture, we've already got labeled as a 0 squared, plus our y here is, along the other axis is, let me go ahead and label that, y is going to be 1. So that's our 1 squared equals, and we don't know r, we're trying to find that out right now. So we'd go ahead and do our order of operations, which says to do your exponents first, which says 0 squared is 0, and 1 squared is 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. So that gives us that r squared is 1. So if we wanted just r, we could finish this off by taking the square root of both sides. And what that would do is give us that r equals 1. So we'd go back to our picture and use that our r equals 1. And we'd use that the denominator of our fraction is now 1. Did we really need to find that? Not really. And I'll show you why. Is because we have 0 divided by 1, which is just 0. Had we not even bothered to find the r, 0 divided by anything would have still been 0. It just makes it easier to actually find that number and kind of get in the habit of using the Pythagorean theorem, but you don't have to. Let's take a look at one last problem on this page. Let's take a look at another one that's got a quadrantal angle. Let's take a look at cotangent, of 90. Now, when you see a trig function that's not one of the three main ones, sine, cosine, or tangent, you need to find the original trig function that it's the reciprocal of first. So even though they say cotangent of 90, I don't want to find that. I want to actually find tangent of 90 first. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Tangent of 90 first. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to draw our same point, which our 90 degrees is over here at the end of quadrant 2, and we're going to use the same point, 0, 1, and same triangle, and realizing that we're now looking at tangent of 90 degrees. Remember, tangent here is TOA, opposite over adjacent. Well, opposite in a right triangle, we already said is, so the opposite in a right triangle like this is going to be your y, over your adjacent is, remember, going to be your x. So we have our y and our x. We don't even need to use the Pythagorean theorem, even though we already did it for this angle. So we'd just be using our y first, which is 1, over your x, which is 0. What's the problem here? This time we're getting 0 on the denominator. What do you know about 0 on the denominator is, oops, we cannot divide by 0. So what does this mean? It means that tangent, the fancy answer for this is that tangent of 90 degrees is going to be undefined because we can't divide by 0. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more problems like this. Again, I'm going to start by drawing a basic triangle, just as a quick reminder up on the top of my page of what we're dealing with, where we have our angle coming from the x-axis. And I know it won't always be in the first quadrant like I'm drawing this picture, but this is kind of the right idea. And then we have our, whatever our x value is for our point, is along the base, and whatever our y value for our point is along the height. And again, this is a right triangle. And then we're going to use our hypotenuse, but we're going to call it our radius, r. And remember, because of that, that means that we do have access to the Pythagorean theorem because it is a right triangle. So we will have access to x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Equals r squared. But again, we generally don't want to, we won't be dealing with the r squared. We'll, at the very end, we'll take the square root of both sides, and that will give us whatever r is going to equal. But you can't take the square root until the end. So let's take a look at problem C. In problem C, we've got that we want to find cosine of negative 90. So first thing is that we need to realize is that the negative in front of the 90 does matter. It means that instead of going counterclockwise with our angle, we will be going clockwise with our angle. That's how you get 90 degrees as a negative. So we start at the x-axis and move 90 degrees. And we'll have our point, which is now going to be at, we're going down, so it'll be a 0 because we're not moving left or right, but we are going down, so we'll call that 0, negative 1. So we're going to be trying to find cosine of negative 90 that puts us at this point. And let's see how that's going to go. Well, with cosine, we normally have the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Well, in our right triangle, adjacent is always going to be the x value. That means it'll go on top, and the hypotenuse will now be our r value, which will go on the bottom. And we already have our x value for cosine. It's going to be the x value from our point, which is 0, so that will be 0. Now, you can technically go ahead and find r if you want, but what you'll notice is you don't have to. Why don't you have to? Because at this point, you would notice, well, it doesn't matter what number I get on the bottom, is that I have 0 divided by something. Well, 0 divided by anything, it doesn't matter what it is 0. So what that means is that cosine of negative 90 degrees will always be 0. Had we needed to find r, we would use our Pythagorean theorem of x squared plus y squared equals r squared to figure out what r actually does equal. And you can do that if you really want to. Okay, let's take a look at D. Let's take a look at D. In D, we have tangent of 450 degrees. So first of all, let's figure out where the angle for tangent of 450 degrees would actually even fall. Well, first of all, it's positive, which means we're going to be going counterclockwise. And so if we're going counterclockwise, if we go one full revolution of a circle, it's 360. we actually want to go an extra 90 degrees past that. So we'll keep on going counterclockwise an extra 90 degrees, and what that will do from our starting point at the x-axis will make us still land at where 90 degrees was. So we'll use that point, which is up, not left or right. So our point we can use is 0, 1. So what we need to think about this is that tangent is, we usually use TOA for tangent, which stands for opposite over adjacent. Well, in this case, opposite, whenever you have a right triangle, is going to be your y value, and over your adjacent is always your x value, so it's always y over x. So what does that mean? Well, I can use my y value from my point first, which is 1. That will go in as my y value. And then divided by, now my x value needs to come next. Well, my x value from my point is 0. So notice there is a huge problem here. We end up with 0 on the denominator. What's the problem with that? Is that we can't divide by 0. What does that mean? So if we cannot divide by 0, it means it's going to be undefined. So that means that tangent of 450 degrees is going to be what's called undefined. And why is it going to be called undefined? It's because you can't divide by 0. Whenever you divide by 0, that's actually what we call it, undefined, because it can't be done. And if you actually try to plug it into your calculator, you should get an error message that will probably say ERR, or it might actually say the word error. Let's try